Well, I showed you how to make a practice test, and what I did is I did one. Here are the examples, and let's go through the strategy. Now, you could write this up as homework. You want to copy this in your homework log or whatever. Copy this down and get an answer, and I'll go over the strategy with you. There's a couple of ways to do this. You could add the 15 and 82 and get 97, and then put the larger absolute value on top, which is a negative 104, and then subtract this, get a 7, and then use the sign of the absolute value, which is negative here. Gives you a negative 7, or you just put it in your calculator, go right down. 15 plus 82 minus 104 is negative 7. Now, for this next one, you might want to note the Pythagorean theorem. They want you to find the length of the hypotenuse, side C, and it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now, the formula for finding c is take the square root of both sides, and you end up with, and I will write that out, it's going to be c. See, I lost my nice pen here. C equals the square root of a squared plus b squared. And you can just do some substitution. A squared, which is 4. 4 squared is 16. B squared is 12, so that's 144. So you get the square root of 144 plus 16 is 160. Now that's an irrational number, so they want you to use the square root property. Put that in your calculator, and I'll go second function square root of 160, and I get 12.6491, and they want it to 3 decimal places. Now, as we've mentioned, when they ask you to round off to 3 decimal places, you look at the 4th decimal place. If this is 5 or more, you're going to drop it and add 1 here, which make it 50. So the answer would be 12.650, but it's not 5 or more, so we just drop it, and then this is what we put in as our answer. Now, some of the students already took the Unit 1 test, and that's where they kind of messed up. They didn't know the proper way to round off. Now, in this case, we have a very similar example, but we know here the hypotenuse. What we want to find is side B. So again, it's the same formula, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But to find b, we modify it a little bit. We go b squared equals c squared on this side. But now we take this term, transpose it, it changes its sign, and it becomes a squared. And we take b then, take the square root of this side, is the c squared minus a squared. So let's just do that. Now 16 squared, let's just do that too. 16 squared is 256. Minus a squared, which is 8, is 64. So 256 minus 64 is 192. I'll put it over here. And they also want this to 3 decimal places, so I will put that in my calculator. Second function, square root of 192. And I get 13.8564. Again, I look at the 4th decimal place. It's 4, so I'm just going to drop it, and then this would be my correct answer. Now here's some basic rules of arithmetic dealing with integers. A negative times a negative gives you a positive, and 2 times 8 is positive 16. Guess I should write that in there. Okay, next one. There will be some easy ones. Now, in this one, we're adding unlike sign integers. So the rule is, it's a negative 10. We want to subtract the smaller absolute value. That'll give us a 7. And we use the sign of the larger absolute value, which in this case is negative. Or just put 3 minus 10 in your calculator and you'll get negative 7. Now I saw that some of the people who had taken this test earlier had this one incorrect, because what you need to do first is find what is the absolute value of 7. The absolute value of 7 is 7. Now later they're going to ask us what's the relationship now between this 7 here and then the negative value of the absolute value of negative 7. Well, the absolute value of negative 7 is a 7, but now we apply the negative sign. So our comparison now would be 7 compared to negative 7. What inequality sign would you put there? And 7 is greater than, and that's what you would put in the answer spot. And notice what they're giving you to choose from. And you would choose, of course, this one, greater than. All right, moving on to another. Find the value of the indicated square root. So once again, using your calculator, 289. Now, this comes out to be a perfect square, so you don't have to round it or anything. It's just 17. Because 17 squared equals 289. Now, in this one, they're asking us to plot these integers on this number line. And we plot it by putting a dot at the appropriate place. There's 0, there's 2, there's 3, and there's 4. Now, keep in mind that if they had something like this, just to do some others here, let me clear this up, and we're going to just add a few more here. Again, this is roster notation. If they had something like this, 0, 1, 2, 3, ... there's our ellipsis. How would we graph that on this number line? Well, we would put a dot here at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The ellipsis indicates the pattern is continued, and then they often offer us the idea that we could put an ellipsis out there. Other ways of doing it in other software would be to somehow darken this or choose the arrow that's like this, but this book uses this one. And let me go over one other that we had with you. I'm not sure we're going to get this on the test, but if we had here, we had one of these on our quizzes. Let's say x is greater or equal to 4. And we're going to say the absolute value. And again, we want integers here. Well, we said we do that by taking away the absolute sign and writing it x is greater or equal to 4, or x is less than, we had to reverse the sign, and equal to -4. Okay, so how would we plot that on this graph? Well, we do one side first. X is greater or equal to 4. Remember, we're plotting integers here. So ... and then we put the 3 dots there. And 4 is included in the set. Then we'd go to -4, put a dot there, and there, and then our 3 dots here. And that would be this one. Again, this is only a selection of some of the kinds of examples you might run into. Now, for this one, again, you would put 8 into your calculator, and then plus the square root of 186. So I'm going to do that right now. 8 plus the square root, second function, of 186. Now, in some calculators, they need a parenthesis when you do that. Again, they want us to round to 3 decimal places, so we look at the 4th place. It's a 1, so we're just going to drop it, and this would be our answer. Remember, if it was a 5 or above, we drop it and make the 8 a 9. And that's critical in rounding. Now, for this one, you can add your 2 negatives together, then subtract the 94 from this negative sum, get a value, and then it's going to use a negative sign, or just put it in your calculator. 94 minus 104 minus 69, enter, and you get a negative 79. Again, you could take these two together. This is going to be the larger absolute value, but you take away the negative signs. But keep in mind it's negative, and subtract 94 from that, and then you apply the negative sign. Or just do it the other way. Now, we did one like this already, but again, they're asking us to do it, so a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 5. And this is in roster notation. And we move it up a little. Now again, there's no plus signs, but we can think of that as add these two together, get a negative 109, subtract 79 from it, and you get a 30, and that will be a negative 30. So add these two together, that gives you a negative 109. You're going to subtract 79. That gives you a 30, which you apply that negative sign, the larger absolute value. Or you can just do it sequentially on your calculator. You get the same answer. Alright, this next one is very similar. You can add the 4 and the 106, if you like. And that gives you 110. And then just minus 17 will give you, I believe, 93. Yep. And you can verify with your calculator. Alright, this one's a little tricky, just reviewing the rule a moment. Here we have a negative 14, and then we're saying the opposite of a negative 5 is a positive 5. So in a sense, we're subtracting 5 from 14, getting a 9, then applying the larger absolute sign, which is negative in this case, a negative 9, or just put that in your calculator. And I believe that's our last question. So this test is not that difficult, and hopefully you've been doing your certification and any practice you've tried. You can make your own practice test, but this is one that I did and hopefully is helpful as you prepare for your test next week. Okay.